The VCs of BC by Adam Davidson, co-founder of NPR's Planet Money and a contributing editor at the magazine. The New York Times Magazine, August 27, 2015. One morning, just before dawn, an old man named Azuridi loaded up 2 black donkeys. Their burden was 147 pounds of tin, along with 30 textiles, known as kutanum, that were of such rare value that a single garment cost as much as a slave. Azuridi had spent his life savings on the items because he knew that if he could convey them over the Taurus Mountains to Kanish, 600 miles away, he could sell them for twice what he paid. At the city gate, Azuridi ran into a younger acquaintance, Sharumadad, who said he was heading on the same journey. He offered to take the older man's donkeys with him and ship the profits back. The two struck up a hurried agreement and wrote it up, though they forgot to record some details. Later, Sharumadad claimed he never knew how many textiles he had been given. Azuridi spent the subsequent weeks sending increasingly panicked letters to his sons in Kanish, demanding they track down Sharumadad and claim his profits. These letters survive as part of a stunning, nearly miraculous window into ancient economics. In general, we know few details about economic life before roughly 1000 AD. But during one 30-year period, between 1890 and 1860 BC, for one community in the town of Kanish, we know a great deal. Through a series of incredibly unlikely events, archaeologists have uncovered the comprehensive written archive of a few hundred traders who left their hometown Azur in what is now Iraq to set up importing businesses in Kanish, which sat roughly at the center of present-day Turkey and functioned as the hub of a massive global trading system that stretched from Central Asia to Europe. Kanish's traders sent letters back and forth with their business partners, carefully written on clay tablets and stored at home in special vaults. Tens of thousands of these records remain. One economist recently told me that he would love to have as much candid information about businesses today as we have about the dealings, and in particular about the trading practices of this 4,000-year-old community. Trade is central to every key economic issue we face. Whether the subject is inequality, financial instability, or the future of work, it all comes down to a discussion of trade. Trade of manufactured goods with China, trade of bonds with Europe, trade over the internet or enabled by mobile apps. For decades, economists have sought to understand how trade works. Can we shape trade to achieve different outcomes, like a resurgence of manufacturing or a lessening of inequality? Or does trade operate according to fairly fixed rules, making it resistant to conscious planning? Economists creating models of trade have faced a challenge because their data have derived exclusively from the modern world. Are their models universal or merely reflections of our time? It's a crucial question because many in our country would like to change our trading system to protect American jobs and to improve working conditions here and abroad. The archives of Kanish have proved to be the greatest single source of information about trade from an entirely pre-modern milieu. In a beautifully detailed new book, Ancient Kanish, written by a scholar of the archive, Mogens Tolle Larsen, to be published by Cambridge University Press later this year, we meet dozens of traders of Kanish and their relatives back home in Azur. Larsen has been able to construct family trees, detailing how siblings and cousins, parents and spouses traded with one another and often worked against one another. We meet struggling businessmen, like Azuridi, and brilliant entrepreneurs, like Shalem Azur, who built a wealthy dynasty that lasted generations. In 2003, while covering the war in Iraq, I traveled to many ancient archaeological sites. The huge burial mounds, the carvings celebrating kings as relatives to the gods, all gave the impression of a despotic land in which a tiny handful of aristocrats and priests enjoyed dictatorial control. But the Kanish documents show that at least some citizens had enormous power over their own livelihoods, achieving wealth and power through their own entrepreneurial endeavors. The details of daily life are amazing, but another scholar, Gojko Berjomovic, of Harvard, realized that the archive also offered insight into something potentially more compelling. Many of the texts enumerate specific business details: the price of goods purchased and sold, the interest rate on debt, the costs of transporting goods, and the various taxes in the many city-states that the donkey caravans passed on the long journey from Azur to Kanish. Like most people who have studied Kanish, Barjamovich is an Assyriologist, an expert in ancient languages and culture. Earlier this year, he joined some economists, as well as some other Assyriologists and archaeologists, on a team that analyzed Kanish's financial statistics. The picture that emerged of economic life is staggeringly advanced. The traders of Kanish used financial tools that were remarkably similar to checks, bonds, and joint stock companies. They had something like venture capital firms that created diversified portfolios of risky trades. And they even had structured financial products. People would buy outstanding debt, sell it to others, and use it as collateral to finance new businesses. The 30 years for which we have records appear to have been a time of remarkable financial innovation. It's impossible not to see parallels within our own recent past. Over the 30 years covered by the archive, we see an economy built on trade in actual goods, silver, tin, textiles, transform into an economy built on financial speculation, fueling a bubble that then pops. After the financial collapse, there is a period of incessant lawsuits as the central government in Azur desperately tries to come up with new regulations and ways of holding wrongdoers accountable, though there never seems to be an agreement on who the wrongdoers are exactly. The entire trading system enters a deep recession lasting more than a decade. The traders eventually adopt simpler, more stringent rules, and trade grows again. Economists were drawn to the Kanish archive because it offered an unprecedented chance to see how well the gravity model applied in an economy entirely unlike our own. This trade was conducted via donkey, through a land of independent city-states whose legal and cultural systems were totally dissimilar to any we know. But still, the model held up. Ali Hurtatsu, a University of Chicago economist on the Kanish team, says that the trade figures between Azur and Kanish match the formula almost perfectly. It was a very nice surprise, he told me. There is much a society can do within a government's borders to address the unequal impact of global trade. They can educate children for more competitive careers, train displaced workers for new industries, or even directly compensate those who fail to benefit from global trade. That, in fact, is what the people of Azur did 4,000 years ago, as Barjamovich pointed out to me. Trade brought enormous wealth to a dozen or so families, but rather than hold all of it for themselves, the wealthy were made to redistribute a high percentage of their earnings through taxes and religious foundations that used the money for public good. This way, the wealth created by trading with Kanish made nearly everybody, at least every free citizen, better off.